Wow. So anyways, hi. Again. Welcome to the Loreweek. I'm your host, the Lore Runner. Anybody who thinks this is an FF is officially blind. So, before we get to the actual things... So... I want to discuss this first. I'm not even going to put a timestamp for this, because this is in our intro section here. I've decided to dance around this topic, but I do think it is deserving of being brought up. I want you to imagine for a moment that you live in Fakistan, okay? And in Fakistan has just gotten the new Supreme Poobah Fake Dude. Everyone tends to be named Fake in Fakistan. It's kind of a cultural thing. And Fake Dude has just wound up and said, I like kicking puppies! Okay, you with me so far? So... What I find amusing about this is how this has affected certain industries within Fakistan. Because within Fakistan now, several of those industries can now go forward with public statements and say, I personally, with great consideration, do not agree the policy of kicking puppies. I believe that puppies should not be kicked. And then everybody just kind of jumps on the fact that they're saying, oh my god, they say that kicking puppies is bad, as if it's a big deal. It's really funny to watch this happen, because a large number of companies in the States right now are basically getting free press by doing the relative equivalent of saying that they're not in favor of kicking puppies. Also, for those of you not aware, we had the FF7 anniversary quite recently. You probably wouldn't know it for the way they did it. I gotta be honest, I thought the anniversary event was garbage. Valvedrix probably... Valvedrix actually messaged me about this. I'm sure some of you have been aware of this as well. But all I gotta say is that it's really strange how... How do I put this? I guess what I want to say is, if you're going to make an effort, make an effort. Don't make a pathetic showing, which is what they actually did. I'm sorry, I really am, but this is also not the first really pathetic anniversary we've seen within the last year, actually. It was pathetic. The stream was a disaster. It was actively, bad. I thought they'd actually look at the... I honestly thought I was watching Konami for just a second with how bad the presentation overall was. And, as Valvedrix points out, there is something that is extremely relevant, and that's the fact that they're like, oh, yes, we'll definitely be announcing stuff all year, but again... That's what they normally do. That's standard. That's not news. Hang on, did I do the transparency right? No, I didn't. That needs to be behind me. It's not news. Saying we will continue to release information throughout the year is like saying, today I will probably eat, and I will probably go to sleep at some point. I mean, there's no news there. It was bad. Was it as bad as the Sonic stream? No. That was... The Sonic stream went into bad, and then briefly went into so bad it's good, and then somehow looped around into horrible, and then actually went one final step further. And that is about how I do the categories. There's bad, so bad it's good, horrible, and then just the bottom of the barrel. The lamentation category. And... wow. The Sonic stream was... the final level down. But yeah, no, the FF7, I hesitate even call it that, the FF anniversary thing was bad. We'll see what they actually do. I stand firm in my statement that the odds of Kingdom Hearts 3 coming out this year is virtually non-existent. I stand firm in my commitment to the idea that I wouldn't be surprised. I would put, say, about a 30% chance of FF7 Episode 1 coming out this year. So, yeah, Valvedrix is hitting the nail on the head. I was going to mention all these points as well, but he's just nailing them. There was a lot. Just watch it. Just watch it. It was bad. What's our timestamp? I'm going to go ahead and start here. Speaking of Square, as much as I hate to say it, called it. How's the audio volume, by the way? Yeah, I'd say Kingdom Hearts 3 is definitely being pushed back. At this point, I'd put a 99% probability on Kingdom Hearts 3 not coming out this year. I would be immensely surprised if it did. And if it does, I almost guarantee you it will be an unfinished product that they will start patching. Cough, cough, FF15. I like FF15. You know this. But there's zero denying the fact that FF15 was a rushed product. Valvedrix has a gender? Sorry, I'm sorry. That I shouldn't make that kind of joke. Right now, that's a current hot button topic, and... Anyways, so let's talk about Square Enix. Let's talk about. So, I'm going to stab you, Ruximus. Let's talk with a carrot. Yes, this is a carrot. You can see here. Didn't have time to eat it before I started streaming. Let's talk about how I mentioned how Square Enix was getting in bed with Disney, and I talked about this last week, and I don't think I really fleshed it out as much as I should have. But it was funny because it was after that I found out the fate of Eidos with regards to Square Enix. So for those of you not aware, Deus Ex has basically been canceled. I don't mean canceled, I mean discontinued. Probably not forever. There will probably be something in the future, but Mankind Divided, despite being an absolutely phenomenal game that knocked it out of the park so hard, my head was still spinning for months afterwards. Oh yes, by the way, we have a Voot. I'm sorry. I meant to put that up. Oop. Is a game that didn't sell as well as they were hoping, and of course Square Enix has been getting in bed with Disney, and there's a Holy Avengers project thing, and blah blah blah. So anyways, the people who were working on Deus Ex, and were going to continue the Deus Ex series, are now working on a Guardians of the Galaxy game. I don't know what I think about that. I mean, I obviously think it's a shame because I really, really liked Mankind Divided, but the idea of that team and that level of quality team making some MCU products is something that I would normally agree with. Oh my God, they're making a Guardians of the Galaxy game. That's great. I can't wait for it. And yet at the same time, you know, this is. I mean, there's some problems with that. So, I mean, there's some real problems with that. So, what we are getting into is the realm of movie-licensed games, which is also a very, very dangerous field as far as we are concerned. Some people define the term shovelware as licensed games that are crap, and it's not really... No, I don't. Hates Disney, especially since we would actually know about it. You can't keep that kind of thing secret. Not in this day and age. So, yeah, as Mandarton says, this is a big dice roll. Because how many really good movie games are there? There are a few. There have been the rare exceptions. But if you look at... Let's not even say movie. Licensed games. How many really good licensed games have there been? Because... I don't know the actual numbers, so I am making up numbers, but if I were to guess, I would say that we have about 99%, so not exaggerating, 99% shovelware garbage across the last 3 decades, and then 1% actually good games, as far as licensed game goes. So, we'll see what exactly they're doing with this. I don't really count Star Wars, but even if we count Star Wars, that still doesn't add that as many games as you'd think. Like, at absolute most, we're talking like 20 additional games for adding Star Wars. compared to the quite literally hundreds of shovelware garbage. I mean, yeah, as Gnarlix says, NES and SNES movie games are literally considered classic for how god-awful they were. Any of you watch AGDQ this year with me? I mean, I know a lot of you did, but in the middle of the night they were doing awful games done quick, and thankfully I got to catch some of it. I still need to watch the things I missed, but Time Cop, which is a SNES game. You remember that? Just naming one example there. Just one example of what I'm talking about when it comes to shovelware. Now, I'm not saying that the Guardians of the Galaxy game made by the Deus Ex team is going to be Time Cop. God, I hope it's not. However, that's insane, Valadrix. However, I do have to point out, statistically speaking, the odds of licensed gaming being good is low. And it's not just because of the fact... I mean, this is actually a whole topic, and I'm not sure I want to discuss this in depth. That's true, Mike. It was pretty funny, though. Is Shovel Knight shovelware? Thankfully, no. Shovel Knight is shovel awesome. There are a lot of reasons why shovelware tends to be bad, and it mostly boils down to nothing to do with the devs. And I mean that sincerely. Imagine being a developer on a project that has a deadline that's pretty short, and a budget that's pretty short, because again, the people in charge of making the decision, the people who have procured the licensing rights to this product, this movie or whatever, to put into a game format, don't actually care that much if it's a good game, because that's not relevant to them. Day one sales, banking on the fact that it's riding the wave of popularity, is what they care about. Also keep in mind that a lot of these decisions are made after it has become popular, which actually pushes the time and budget thing even further down. Like, in some cases, they're like, okay, it'll be planned. We know this movie's coming out in, say, August, so we want this game to come out in August, right? What more often tends to happen, though, is a game has come out and then is successful, and then they're like, or excuse me, I'm saying, I keep doing that. A movie comes out and then is successful, and then people scramble to pick up the rights and try to get it in as quickly as possible before the wave of popularity dies down. You see how this can be a problem. So what I'm trying to say is, even though that I have a fairly large amount of faith in this particular development team, I don't think that matters when it comes to this kind of product. Now, that being said, this is historically speaking. So it is possible that Square Enix will not be cracking the whip, because Disney will not be cracking the whip, because that would be originating from Disney. Disney cracking the whip down, and it would just... It's the crackdown effect. You crack the whip on someone, so that person cracks the whip on someone, so that person cracks the whip on someone, and it just kind of goes down the line, right? They might not. That is true. It is possible they might be like, no, we want to put out a good product. Or they could be interested in capitalizing on the Guardians of the Galaxy 2 that's coming out this year and want to push out something as quickly as possible. This is a huge dice roll. I think Mandartin, someone in chat said that earlier. This is just a dice roll. I have no idea if it's going to be good or bad. However, I can definitively say that this news made me sad, because Deus Ex has been put on hold because of this. I really, really liked Deus Ex Mankind Divided. If I didn't make that clear during both the premiere run and the review, that game is way up there in my list. It's already in the top 100, without question. And I liked Human Revolution. It was okay. And, of course, I am a huge fan of the original Deus Ex. And it is a franchise with promise. And it is a franchise that... I mean, Mankind Divided basically ended on a to be continued. I mean, it wasn't literally a to be continued, but it was basically this... the whole thing felt like Chapter 1. That was actually one of the bigger complaints I heard about Mankind Divided. I'm not spoiling anything for those of you who haven't actually gone through it yet, but, Chapter 1, Pakung. And now, yeah. Anyways. Yes, that's right. I also mentioned it in my top games of 2016, because it was a good game. It was a really good game. It doesn't help that the game was also screwed with. For those of you not aware, not really. Hates Disney. I mean, it was okay. Invisible War, I don't hate Invisible War as much as most people, but I do think it was just kind of eh. I would say Invisible War is the worst of the series so far. But it doesn't help that Square Enix corporate came down on Eidos at some point in time and basically said, we're adding microtransaction fluff and this sort of free-to-play game which we're tacking onto your game. I forget the number. It was a number of weeks. It was like 2 to 6 weeks, something like that, before the game was actually finished. Right at the end, they're just like, by the way, you need to code this in. No warning, no nothing. And the developers had to scramble in order to get the free-to-play garbage tacked onto it. And, of course, lots and lots of people have bashed Mankind Divided, including, for example, Jim Sterling, just to name one example right off the top of my head, who have flat out... Hang on. I still have it pasted. There you go. Who have flat out said that they refuse to consider the game for Game of the Year potential, despite the quality of the game, because of the microtransaction fee-to-play just garbage that was tacked onto the game. So, in addition to the fact that Mankind Divided did not get the general attention it could, because it is kind of a niche game, let's be honest with ourselves, it got further bashed because of people who are into that thing because of the stuff that was tacked onto it. So, this is kind of a lose-lose situation. Yes, the Lore Runner is now a bot. Beep boop by Sony Products. Quick thing here before I go forward. For those of you curious, or not curious, I imagine none of you actually... Yes, I know, Darkrai. I actually watch Jim Sterling fairly regularly, but it's mostly to get a different opinion. He and I disagree on many, many things, but I don't mean that in a negative way. You know, I don't hate him for it. It's just he and I disagree on many, many things. The only thing I hate he does is that "thank God for me" thing. I can't stand that. It's much easier to just say, it's much better, don't you think? That's what I'm here for, Dakota. Trying to make that so. Okay, so, before I go forward, I just want to point out that I'm trying a new method of scheduling on the website. Feel free to go hit the website right now. You'll see what I mean. And if you don't, then I'm not doing it as well as I could be. Let me know what you think. Shrug. Here, hang on. Let me tell the... thank you, Lurker. Lurker got there before I did. So that's going to be just kind of... I'm going to try and schedule my explorations a little bit more than I have been. I've actually been deliberately going out of my way to not schedule explorations, to leave them very malleable. But since I have such a gargantuan list now of games already to explore, I think I can actually line them up and literally start going down the list. So that's what I'm going to start doing. And of course, I've started adding dates for the upcoming Ruminations, and I've shifted around a bit, so... Well, I do... let me make it clear, by the way. Yeah, that's coming out this Friday, Maximus. Let me make one thing clear. I don't think Jim Sterling is stuck up. I am actually quite aware of the fact that Jim Sterling has the same general kind of self-conscious, confidence issues that I do. I have actually been following Jim Sterling since the Destructoid, I think, days, when he was just... So... Anyways, let's move on to our next point here. Who out there remembers Electronics Boutique? Amonsment? The what? What, Zawan? Guys, I think Zawan has issues. No, it is Destructoid. I was pretty right. I was correct. Anyways, Electronics Boutique. Then there was EB Games. I imagine more of you remember that one, because that's a little more recent. That's merely going back to about 2003 or so for that one. Electronic Boutique was around back in the 90s. Going back a bit further there. Nowadays they're all Gamestops here in the States, and a lot of people know them more as Gamestops. So I decided to pull up a couple things here. Did I delete the announcement? What announcement? Like, seriously, what announcement? Hang on, let me pull up my website here. I don't see any announcements being deleted, so I'm going to go with no. Yeah, I think I'll go with no on that one. So, I just wanted to bring this up. For those of you not aware, GameStop is evil and horrible. And that's not just speaking as someone who's worked, I've never worked at a GameStop, but I actually have two friends who have worked at a GameStop, so I have their experiences, in addition to my own experiences of going there. I have actually not purchased anything from GameStop since Final Fantasy XII came out. Oh, that'll be taken up by the new interactive storytelling feature, is the one, so that's why that's there. I know, right, Ben Dorton? So GameStop's horrible. I'm just going to say that pretty flatly. GameStop is pretty horrible. And they've been horrible for a while, and I have actually refused to buy things from GameStop, pretty much on principle, because it's a pretty horrible place. We, of course, know all about the garbage bins policy thing they had to start implementing, and by had to, I mean... Yeah, we also know that GameStop was briefly considering going into the phone business and leaving the games business. That backlashed so hard they flip-flopped on that. But they did still shut down, what was it, like 500 stores? A lot of people lost their jobs as a result of that thing. So they have this program here called Circle of Life, which gives percentage quotas. Now, this is nothing new. Of course, just about every company out there has metrics. That's what we call this, for those of you not aware. Metrics are all about, this is a way of measuring your work value, your value to the company. Metrics, let me play devil's advocate for just a second. Metrics are a useful tool when utilized properly with regards to basically any corporation. You have to be able to judge if an employee is actually procuring something, producing some worth for the company. Duh. That being said, speaking from my own corporate experience and everything I've seen in my life, metrics are almost never employed properly. Metrics are usually used as an arbitrary thing that has no attachment to reality. That's basically, do this or you're fired. This is your minimum. If you do better than this, it's going up. It generates an extremely hostile work environment. So the Circle of Life is a GameStop metric program that adds percentage quotas for pre-orders, reward card subscriptions, used game sales, and game trade-ins. What is missing from this list? I'll give you a hint. It's new frickin' games. So these quotas are based on the store's total transactions, and thus it is a percentile game, which means, for example, if someone comes in and buys a new game without pre-ordering a game, subscribing for a rewards card, buying a used game, or trading, those percentages go down because it's a zero-sum game, right? You have 100% of total exports, and if you buy a new game, they're not increasing the percent of those things, and those percentage quotas are mandatory. So salespeople have literally been incentivized to stop people from buying new games at GameStop. I'm not saying that's necessarily deliberate by GameStop corporate. It might just be stupidity, but it is still the truth, regardless. I'm going to pull a couple of quotes here from people who are requesting anonymity. We are telling people we don't have new systems in stock, so we don't take a $300 or $400 hit on our pre-owned numbers. This is company-wide, and in discussions with my peers, it is common practice. We also tell customers we don't have copies of new games in stock when they're on sale. For example, Watch Dogs 2 is currently $29.99 new and $54.99 pre-owned. We just tell them we don't have the new one in stock and shuffle them out the door. End quote. By the way, I have worked retail in my life, and yeah, it sucked. Everyone should work retail at least once in their life to understand. Same with fast food, actually. I really do actually believe that. Damn it, so they have this COL, the Circle of Life score. Each of the 4 categories represents 25% of that score. So if a store hits their quotas, but for pre-orders and rewards cards, but not for trade-ins and used games, their COL will be 50%. If they hit all 4, they'll get 100%. The goal is 75%. I want you to think about that for a moment. The goal is for 75% of... Oh, don't give me that, Zoan. The goal is for 7... I am an opponent of GameStop. Let me make that as abundantly clear as I can. Screw GameStop. I have had that opinion for almost a decade now. And it has only gotten worse. I am a huge proponent of used game stores. There's a place that used to be back where I used to live called Vintage Stock. They're cool. They do used games properly. They buy used games, and they sell used games. They don't mandate that employees have 75% of the total business they run through their register being these 4 things. This is ridiculous and stupid. And there's another quote here. All of the company announcements have been under the guise of doing better for the customer and giving the customer what they want and a better value, which is not true. Why would I get reserves if it's going to lead to a new sale? Why would I sell you a new game you're excited about if it's going to hurt my numbers at the end of the day? Why would I sell you a new system if I'm going to be fired for doing so? It makes no sense. Not long after this, GameStop released a public message, which I'd like to share with you. While the behaviors described in the news article are disappointing, I know they don't represent the vast majority of our associates and how they treat customers. The Circle of Life program definitely does not place pressure on store associates to mislead customers on the value of certain products. All of these circumstances and situations are edge cases, their words, and almost all of the employees have agreed that the new quotas have not placed significantly more pressure on their stores. This is all in the official GameStop announcement. I actually have the whole memo right here in front of me. You know what? Let me just read. This is great. I'd like to take a moment to address... so this is actually a memo that was given out to GameStop managers. Tee-hee-hee. And one manager actually quit over this one, reportedly. Dear GameStop family, I want to take a moment to address an article that called into question our Circle of Life program, the exceptional service you provide customers every day. In the article, there are behaviors described that indicated our Circle of Life program placed pressure on store associates to mislead customers in the value of certain products. Let me be clear! Nothing could be further from the truth. You and I know at GameStop it is absolutely our mission to make money, to help our customers get the best advice and price on any product we sell through buying, trading, pre-ordering, and earning points. We want every customer to get the product and deal that is right for them, whether it be a new pre-owned game or game product, digital game or collectible. The Circle of Life generates great value for our customers. Consider these facts. GameStop has given $1 billion of trade to our customers. 70% of the time, those trade dollars were immediately spent on new gaming products. I'll let you think on that fact for just a moment. I've heard that many of you concerning this I've heard this from many of you concerning this, and know that you work very hard to make sure our customers have great experience. Thank you for that. While the behaviors described in these news articles are disappointing, I know they don't represent the vast majority of our associates and how they treat our customers. Thank you again for all your hard work on creating customer experiences. Your passion, knowledge, and commitment to excellence motivates me, and it's what sets GameStop apart from all others. Keep up the great work and power to the players. Sincerely, Tony Bartel. Anyways, I don't actually have much else to add to that. I think it really speaks for itself. Hang on. Just off the top of my head, this is 1 or 2s. Now, let me check. Oh, I was wrong. That's why I didn't recognize it. It's a 4DS's version. I don't know. I don't really usually listen to the DS soundtrack. That's why. Hi, Bradley. Don't worry. Power to the players! I'd do this, but I don't think they're at the Nazi level. I don't want to make that exaggeration. But seriously, screw GameStop. time is it? 30. Let's talk about something positive real quick. For those of you not aware, Stellaris is getting a new expansion. It's cool looking. It's called Utopia. They're introducing Ascension perks, which are basically talents. As far as, you know, most gaming, Diablo 2, World of Warcraft, whatever you want to call it. Talents, that's what they are. You can choose between 3 different talent categories, which are the biological path. In other words, if you want to become the Zerg. The psionic path, if you want to become the Protoss. Or the synthetic path, if you want to become the Reapers. And there are, of course, different options within these broad categories to help decide your species, blah, blah, their talents. Utopia will include the option to make megastructures, which is really, really cool. For those of you who don't know what a megastructure is, a ring world would be a megastructure. A Dyson sphere would be a megastructure. I don't know if they mean Dyson spheres or Dyson shells. Those are actually 2 separate things, and science fiction tends to confuse the 2. But either way, it's cool. I mean, I'm cool with either one. You'll be able to set specific policies in which the species under your rule will have specific rights and citizenships, going up to full citizenship or being able to establish a caste system or whatever it is you want to do. So you can make it. You can actually artificially make it so that, for example, humans have full citizenry rights, but Barbarians don't actually have anything. You know, they're worker caste or whatever like that. I probably won't use that system personally, but that's pretty cool, actually. I like that option's being added. Is the Death Star a megastructure? It probably will be. Yeah, by the way, what they probably mean is a Dyson shell. If you have ever seen Star Trek's Dyson spheres, those are actually Dyson shells. So that's usually the quickest, easiest way I can get that across. There's 2 in Star Trek Online, and it was shown in the episode... I don't remember the name, actually. It's the Scotty episode of TNG. That was a Dyson shell. So, cool. This is all cool stuff. But here's the part I'm really excited about. Habitat stations, allowing for more players to build up rather than to build out. For those of you who don't know what that means, just really quick, in Relics, thank you. In 4X games, actually in most games generally, you ideally want the ability to build horizontally or to build vertically. In other words, the ability to have, like, one city that is really, 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 really advanced, or lots and lots of cities that are not particularly advanced. Hence the terminology. So they're adding these new space stations and habitat stations that allow you to house more population on planets and help you to build up, which I think is awesome. I love that option, and I love that in 4X games. I know Stellaris isn't really a 4X game, but whatever, you get my point. I love that in games. Is that better? Yeah, Lurker. A Dyson sphere is what... Yeah, he's got it. It's a little different than a Dyson shell. And yeah, the idea of actually building your own ring world is really cool. I do know that ring worlds exist in the game. I haven't found one myself yet, but it's cool. I like it. Just think, guys, we can have our own hive world. I actually don't have much else to share. Unfortunately, we do not have a release date at the moment. At least unless I check. Let me check if I haven't actually checked yesterday or today. Let's see. I actually have a site I've been watching on this. Let's see if it's been updated. Looks like no. So we still don't actually have a release date, which sucks. Also, there will be this other thing. I'm sorry, I actually kind of forgot to bring this up. There will be traditions, where you can collect Unity points by adopting ideas and bonuses that will help your particular species and the tradition, building traditions, basically, which unlock perks if you collect so many traditions within a certain thing. It seems most similarly to the policies thing over in Civ 5, from what I've read. I don't know, Dakota. That would be really cool, Leander. And hello, Tigzar. Uh-oh. For trash... That's awesome, Valvedrix. Apparently, I am a trash talker. Who knew? Who knew? What is that from? That image? That had to have been, like, a while ago. Anyways, what's Club Penguin? Oh, I want to be able to build dreadnoughts too. I actually have a mod right now that allows me to build dreadnoughts, super ships, basically. And admittedly, the only reason I have the mod is so I can build SSDs, because I have another mod that gives me Star Wars ships. But still, super dreadnoughts. They're also still in the middle of a work on a Star Trek Total Conversion, which looks really cool so far. Ah, the Inquisition review, I was going to say. Thank you, Krenzler. Admiral Krenzler. Let's talk about something very sad, since we just brought up Star Trek. My math brain isn't working. 36. We didn't talk about that long, did we? So, let's talk about something sad. Statistically speaking, oh, okay. I do know what Club Penguin is, actually. I beta tested that game. I didn't like it that much. I don't remember much else about it, so I can't even comment on it. It sucks that it's shutting down. A lot of MMOs are shutting down. Anyway, Star Trek. Let's talk about Star Trek. Statistically speaking, we are now likely to never get a Blu Ray of DS9 and Voyager. Let me give you the summary, and then I'm going to go in depth onto this one, because I actually have the interview right somewhere, right here. The summary is that when they went back... Hi, Hourglass, I haven't seen you around in a while. When they went back and did the Blu-ray of the original series, and... Dude, Roximus, you have no idea how many MMOs I've beta tested, do you? When they went back and did the original series was done in an era of television when they had... I'm going to misuse my words, I'll describe the full details, but basically, the way that they recorded the footage, it was they would then take that footage and then dumb it down to the quality level that would usually go on DVDs or television, right? So when they went and did the Blu-ray thing, they could just use that original footage, which was at the quality needed. It was a relatively simple and easy thing to do, relatively cheap. All they had to do was come up with new effects for certain shots, and mostly the external shots, which, in my opinion, I really like, by the way. Enterprise, of course, got Blu-rays because it was done in the modern era. It was done at a time in which they had the digital access to simply have the higher definition shots and therefore be able to do them. TNG, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager sit in a kind of a weird period of time, historically speaking, from a technical perspective for television, because they didn't. The only thing they had of the original quality was the original negatives. In other words, the unedited footage. Yeah, what GD Bats is saying. They shot... So, the only higher quality stuff they have for TNG, DS9, and Voyager is the original, and I'm going to say this again, unedited negatives. I want to make this as clear as I can, because I didn't even fully realize this. The TNG Blu Rays, which I have bought, by the way, just for the sake of supporting them. They're right here. TNG Blu Rays are proper remakes of TNG. Remember, a proper remake means you have basically some of the original pieces, but you're effectively making a new game, right? This set of Blu-rays right here, they went back and actually re-edited and re-added the music and re-added the special effects, basically from the original negatives. I mean, they didn't have to reshoot anything, but they had to do all of the other work involved. There's a reason this took 3 frickin' years to do, which I didn't know until I found out about this quite recently. This was a colossal effort. Then CBS, and if you remember, I talked about this, then CBS hiked up the price like crazy for these. You remember when these first came out and a single season was $150? Because I do. And I was just pissed off about this. I was like, what the crap? And so it undersold. Some people didn't really understand the full amount of work going into it. I'll include myself in that. I was ignorant of how much work and effort was putting into this. CBS was overcharging, and some people didn't want to double dip. Well, I already have the VHS sets. I already have the DVD sets. Why should I rebuy this? So it didn't really sell that well. The only way to get DS9 and Voyager in the same way is to do the same process with them. Properly remaking them. I'm sorry, Hourglass. The sprite version of me in the suit didn't look that great, so I abandoned it within like a day. So, yeah. Now, here's the really screwed up part. How many of you remember, someone pointed it out earlier, the Star Wars, yeah, there it is, GD Bat pointed out. Who remembers the Star Wars special editions when they first came back out? When they were first doing the special edition remastering and putting it back in the theaters. You remember that? I mean, I remember that. I was super excited about it. I watched all 3 in a row in the theaters. It was great. And those are actually still, to this day, my favorite versions of Star Wars, actually. I know that's an unpopular opinion, but there it is. I point this out because one of the most significant things that happened in that particular remaster was that in the opinion of the people who went back and did that whole process, which is exactly what I just said, original negatives, recutting, re-editing, there is the opinion of the people who did that if they had waited another year or 2, they never would have actually been able to. The negatives would have degraded too far. I have actually seen footage of the negatives just if they just took the original negative, didn't clean it up at all, and just dumped it onto footage. I've seen what that looks like. It looked bad, like worse than the original footage, because negatives age. They go bad. They rot, basically. You see the problem here? Because it is not financially feasible right now, in CBS's opinion, to go do the proper remake process on DS9 and Voyager. This is assuming it's possible, by the way. Nobody's even looked for the negatives. We're not even sure they're there. But because it has not been considered financially feasible right now, those negatives may degrade too far before real interest is reinitialized. And if we ever get to the point where we may actually have the ability to go back and do it, it will never happen, and we will have officially lost the chance ever to have a DS9 or a Voyager Blu Ray. Now I'm going to go over the details. This is Robert Meyer Burnett. Great guy. He's done a lot of work with Star Trek over the years. And he, of course, was the head guy in charge of the remastering of original series, Enterprise, and Next Generation. So, until fairly... I'm just going to start reading him word for word, okay? So this is his article here. Until fairly recently, motion pictures and TV were mostly shot in 35mm film. Live television, news, talk shows, game shows, soap operas, etc. were shot in various video formats, and the difference from film was readily apparent. Some television used 16mm, while certain event films were shot in 65mm, but for the most part, 35mm was the industry standard. 35mm resolution was about 20 megapixels or greater. Comparatively, the NTSC video, which if you've seen something on VHS, that's what you were seeing, used in North America and Asia, was basically 640 by 480. Way, way less than the resolution of a 35mm. Both motion pictures and TV used to be finished the same way. After being shot on film, the film was edited, the negative was cut, and prints were struck from the cut negative. All the visual effects, titling, etc. were also shot on film. Depending on the finishing process, the resolution of the 35mm film was retained in the cut negative. The cut negative, properly stored and cared for, was then put away until needed to strike new prints or to be scanned for television or home video. It was the dark times before the rise of HD and now UHD images. All movies on television originated on film were scanned down to standard definition video resolution from their original negatives. The NTCS resolution in North America and Asia. So a 20 megapixel image scanned down to 640 by 480. So we could all watch them on broadcast television and later on VHS and DVD. For over 50 years, the images we saw on TV were really quite terrible, displaying a small fraction of the color and clarity contained in the original 35mm camera negatives. But most people didn't know this, or care. Television was television, movies were movies, and of course movies looked better when you went to the theater. Here's where it gets interesting and maddening. In the mid-'80s, the advent of cheaper and cheaper computing technology allowed video post-production to grow more and more sophisticated. Now, a new post-production methodology, once existing only for shows originating on videotape, like soap operas and talk shows, could now be applied to shows shot originally on film. The program could be shot on 35mm, but instead of editing on film and then cutting the negative, the original 35mm footage would be scanned to videotape at the NTSC resolution, and the rest of post-processing would then happen at the tape on reduced cost. However, no film negative was cut, so the final product would only exist on videotape at NTSC's extremely reduced video resolution and color. True blacks, stable reds, rich blues did not exist on videotape. Those shows, originally shot on 35mm with a 20 megapixel resolution, were never again to be seen if finished on tape. For certain programming, such as science fiction television, the upside was it allowed certain visual effects to be produced far, far cheaper for television than before. For instance, a phaser blast or an energy field, once hand-animated and shot on film, can now be generated and animated by some kind of video toaster technology at way less cost and way less time. Once, a producer might only be able to afford 2 phaser beams in an entire episode, but now they could get affordance of 7 or 8, allowing for much more interesting firefights. For the discerning viewer, however, this combination of film and video imagery, especially in genre programming, didn't look very convincing, because they were editing directly on NTSC, excuse me. The mid-'80s Twilight Zone revival, as much as I adore it, is a perfect example of the incongruity of the 35mm live-action photography and NTSC video-generated special effects, but most viewers couldn't tell the difference, or didn't care. In the late 86 and early 87 development of TNG, it was decided that the only way to produce the series on time and on budget, as a quick aside, for those of you not remembering, Star Trek was kind of struggling at this point in history. Star Trek Generations was only allowed to be made because Star Trek IV was such a success. Keep that in mind. It was decided the only way to produce the series on time and on budget was with all the visual effects demand that Roddenberry required, would be to shoot on 35mm film and then finish on videotape. Even the motion-controlled model photography, with all the individual passes required, would be shot on 35 and then, in an unprecedented move, actually composited on videotape, using multiple daisy chains VTRs to minimize the reduction of resolution even further. Unfortunately, this meant that, unlike the TOS and the animated series shows, there would be no 35mm finished negative of TNG, and the series would only ever exist on videotape at NTSC resolution. The same would hold true of DS9 and Voyager. Enterprise, shot in 2001, would be future-proofed, shot on 35mm, finished in HD, with FX created at 720p. Starting in 2004, I'm skipping past a couple of images that are being used to demonstrate it. I'm looking at a picture of DS9 here, and it is blurry as crap. But I know that. I have the DVDs for DS9. Starting in 2004, after the beginning of regular HD broadcasts, it quickly became apparent to anyone paying attention regular resolution NTS video would be rendered obsolete again. After seeing an HD image, who would ever want to watch standard definition video again? Studios quickly began transferring their film and television to the new high-def formats, settling until fairly recently on 1080p as the new industry standard, bringing pixel dimensions up to the standard 1920 by 1080. Roughly 5 times the definition of standard definition video. For TOS, the animated series, the transfer into high definition was not a problem. Each episode already exists as a single cut negative, so the transfer process was the same as any film or episode with a cut negative. By the way, this is one of the reasons why we have so many older films on Blu Ray, because they had the original negative on 35mm that they could just dump into an HD process. However, and I'm actually going to skip over this because he talks about things. But TNG, DS9, and Voyager could not be rescanned and released in full HD as the original edit program only existed in NTSC. With worldwide markets rapidly converting to HD, modern Trek, with the exception of Enterprise, would simply no longer be shown anywhere. By the way, this is one of the reasons why they stopped showing the old Star Treks on TV. Now, that has since become a thing again, but some of you may remember that right about when Enterprise was coming out, they stopped showing Voyager, DS9, and TNG on television, on regular broadcasts, on networks. Anywho, with TNG the most successful Trek series by a huge margin, still true to this day actually, Paramount and CBS wanted to figure out a way to not let their crown jewel be thrown onto the scrap heap of history. So a radical notion was proposed: go back to the original negative and rebuild the entire show ground up in high def. This has never actually been done before. and I actually did a little looking into this, has not been done particularly often in the history of television ever. Essentially, all 178 episodes of TNG would go through the entire post-production process again. The original edits would be adhered to exactly, but all the original negative would have to be rescanned, the visual effects would have to be redone, the footage recolor timed, certain visual effects would have to be completely recreated in CGI, and the entire soundtrack would have to be completely redone and remastered. A Herculean task, to be sure, requiring many people and many years, and, this is the relevant part, about $12 million. That was the overall budget that it cost. Not what they had, how much it cost to do this remastering of TNG. This remake of TNG. Now, what can I say, Shadow Machine? Now, the original negative would have to be tracked down, which was stored in thousands of boxes, and then matched to every scene taken from the original episodes, and then the negatives would have to be scanned in at 2K, recolor timed from scratch. The entire palette of the series would literally change. If you've ever seen TNG DVD versus TNG Blu Ray side by side, you know what they mean. The colors quite literally look different. Never mind the incredibly increased resolution. They literally look different. For the model photography, which was also done in 35mm, an added headache was added because celluloid shrinks over 25 years. See you around, Krutzer. And so after so many visual effects passes, it would require pin registering accuracy, sometimes over 10 separate elements to composite, and they wouldn't match up. So they had to be first scanned, recomposited, and then put into the computer, and then certain elements would simply be lost or too damaged to use, so the entire shot would have to be completely recreated in CGI. And there's actually a shot here. For those of you who have seen the episode Data Lore, there's a shot where the crystalline entity first approaches. That shot is 100% new footage. That is a completely new shot that was recreated based on the original shot in CGI. Scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. Now we get to the problem. So, CBS, I hate CBS. I have no reason to not hide that fact. They're horrible, and they've caused me many issues over the years. However, it's not entirely CBS's fault because there are finances involved here, which I'm going to mention here now. During the time this restoration was happening, the popularity of streaming services skyrocketed, and the popularity of physical media began to diminish. Sales of physical discs dropped across the board, regardless of circumstances, and the younger generation thought putting discs in machines was a little bit too 20th century, and even loyal Trek fans were asking themselves, why do I have to buy TNG again? Why do I don't even have a Blu-ray player. I won't all be on Netflix anyways. The justified high price point of the initial Blu-ray seasons did not help sales. So the final result was that the sales were very disappointing. Disc sales didn't match projections and continued to suffer more and more as more people turned to streaming, where Star Trek was already widely available. The newly remastered of TNG episodes have replaced the original versions in streaming, but nowadays, and this is another key point here, people expect HD. So they didn't actually know that they were looking at the remastered versions because it was HD, which is how it's supposed to look. That's the norm now. Deep Space and Voyager would require the same amount of time, manpower, and money in order to do it, and were not as popular as TNG or TOS. Ergo, doing it is simply not financially feasible. And thus we have reality once again being dictated by money. If you'll forgive me for being cynical for a moment. Over the past couple of years, or excuse me, it's been a few years at this point, Little Billy, they released it season by season as they finished the work. You can get it right now, and just be like... So anyways, that right there is why the possibility of a proper HD version of TNG and of DS9 and Voyager is effectively zero at this point. Because it is at least a possibility that enough financial interest will be generated in the future to try and do this. However, that will be at a point in time at which it is actually possible we will not be able to physically do it. it is worth noting that it might not be physically possible now. We don't know because no one's actually bothering. So... because I'm not wearing the cloak anymore, Zoan. Because it's cosplay, and it's ridiculous, and it's silly. I'm using words from viewers on this. So... anyways, do I like China or Chinese people? Why wouldn't I? People are people. They could, Lurker, but CBS has never been known for their intelligence. So, just thought I'd let you know. It is now pretty much official that it will probably never happen. I can't math in my head again. 56. Let's talk about the flaws of exclusive games, shall we? How's that sound for fun? Yes, Dragon Cat. Have you not been... here, look. Here. There's the vote. So... I've actually talked about this before on Loreweek. The idea of... like, I posited a theoretical... you know what? I'm with that, little Billy. They'll get used to it, Zoan. So, I've posited the theoretical to you. If every game that came out on every system, if, you know, FF15 just came out, I don't know, insert a game that you care about. Game you care about has just come out on the PC, the Xbone, the PS4, and the Switch, equally. I posited the question, would you not be predisposed to pick one of the particular versions of that because of your own personal preferences? I posited this question because it was a very important thing to establish, because I am firmly of the opinion that even if exclusives didn't exist, there would still be a console market. I've heard the argument that exclusives have to exist, otherwise there will be one console. But I don't agree with that, and I never have. There's always going to be preference involved. There's always going to be opinion involved. I know people to this day who prefer CRT monitors over everything else. To me, that's alien. I can't even put it into words. That is utterly alien to me. I can't even think about that logically. So, which do you get, right? Which do you prefer? Maybe you prefer the Xbone controller. I know a lot of people actually really like the classic Xbox-style controller. I know a lot of people who like the PlayStation-style controller. And I know a lot of people who like to play with the mouse and keyboard. But I bring this up because it occurred to me during the last week that there is another reason exclusives are stupid. Let's say you have just spent $1 bagrillion making a game, because making games are actually really, really expensive at this point in time. Not counting, of course, you know, separate individual or indie market kind of things. So you have just spent roughly $1 bagrillion making a new game. And now you are being told, thanks to some marketing decisions that have been made by corporate people above you, that that game is only going to be released on this specific market. In other words, the only people who are going to play your game are people who happen to have an Xbone, or a PS4, for example. You are literally artificially limiting your market for no other reason than the fact that someone paid you money to have an exclusive contract. Now, I'm not saying that that's necessarily stupid. I personally think it's stupid. But mathematically speaking, I don't know if you're getting enough money out of the exclusivity thing in order to justify the shrunk market. But regardless of all other things, you are having a shrunk market. Period. Your market has just been reduced artificially. This is also probably one of the reasons why in the last 10 years or so, the concept of timed exclusives has become much, much more common. The classic example of Resident Evil 4 comes to mind immediately. Now, there are some other things to be established with this, but it just brings to mind the idea of how absolutely ridiculous life is. I actually know a fairly large amount about the economic model in which we exist, and it is some of the most nonsensical garbage. You have to, in order to be financially successful right now, you have to be irresponsible, foolish, short-sighted, and deliberately hinder yourself. This is not me making anything up, and this is not my opinion. That is how the economic format of the modern era works. And it continues to work because it has been working and will continue to work and blah, blah, blah. And this is just another aspect of it, of how it actually specifically affects gamers. I gotta be blunt. I don't think most gamers really give a crap about exclusives. I mean, yeah, you're always gonna have the fanboys and the hate boys of any given category of anything, but I would like to think that most people, if a new game is coming out, don't actually really care what system it's coming out on. They care about the game that they have an interest in, and being basically forced to procure a new system. I mean, how many times have I heard the quote? I can't even count how many times I heard the quote, well, I'd like to get game A, but it's on console B, which I don't have. Or, ugh, I'm going to have to buy console B because game A is coming out for it. I'm sure you guys have heard other people say that as well. I wouldn't be surprised if you guys have heard yourselves say that before. I've said that before. There's a reason I have that policy of a console has to justify its existence to me. I would not own a PS4, and I would have not pre-ordered a Switch if I wasn't doing that as my living right now, because they have not justified their existence to me. But, as a result, I would never get to do things like play the new Ratchet & Clank, or play, you know, any of the other PS4 games, like FF15, or the new Zelda. Yeah, well, actually, I would be able to play the new Zelda, but you get the point. The new Mario, we'll use that instead. Yeah, I'm never playing Game A because it came out on Console B because money. I had that perspective for a long time on the PSP. You know? Yeah, the PS3, I gotta be honest, the PS3 never quite justified itself for me. I own a PS3, obviously. I got it for $100 on Super Sale. Thanks to Gary, actually. Gary, it's a long story, but basically Gary got a deal for $100 PS3. He already had one, so he gave it to me. Thank you, Gary. But I gotta be honest, I probably still wouldn't own a PS3 to this day if not for the fact that I got one for $100, because the PS3 never justified itself to me. And it's not just about the fact that, oh, it only has 10 good games on it, although that is very relevant. Yes, it is, Little Billy. But also because the fact that the PS3 was friggin' expensive. Maybe I'm a weirdo, but dropping $300 on something is actually kind of a pain to do. It was a bite to buy the PS4. I had to go without food for a while to afford the PS4. My sister came over and helped give me food, but I was living off of garbage in order to do that, because I am a normal person who does not have a huge amount of disposable cash, like I imagine most of you are, too. I mean, there are gamers who have disposable money just lying around. I know some of them personally. But I am not one of those people. So the idea of jumping $300 on something just to get Game A or Game B is generally not going to be worth it to me. Yeah, $300 is a lot of frickin' food. I could easily make $300 last a month for food. Wouldn't be great, but I could make it happen. Ultimately, this is basically just devolving into a rant about economics and how weird our economic system is. I'll be honest about that. But really, it just boggles my mind, because I know I'm a weird person. I know I am. I get it. And I get that I'm this weird idealistic idiot for looking at things from a different perspective. But to me, the idea of things happening because money is so ridiculous to me. I just finished talking about this with regards to the Star Trek thing, and I am talking about it again with regard to the exclusives thing. Now, there are exceptions, of course. Raskor actually made a great exception earlier. I wanted to comment on that. It's not like every single exclusive is a bad decision. Back in the SNES and Genesis era, it was common practice that the reason exclusives existed was not because Nintendo of America, or I shouldn't say Nintendo, walked over to gaming company B and said, make this game for us, here's money to do so. You know, basically buying exclusivity, which is the common practice now, by the way. But what instead would happen is the gaming company would go to Nintendo, or Nintendo would go to the gaming company and say, let us collaborate on making this game. And thus, the game would usually be superior for the result because they were actually working with the developers of the console. And that is exactly what happened with Bayonetta 2. Nintendo and Platinum, I think, got together and collaborated on Bayonetta 2. And I'm kind of okay with that form of exclusivity. But I think, just in my opinion, there is a world of difference between that and... Hang on. Here. Only release your game on my system. Bayonetta 2 is a really good game, by the way. I mean, I played through it for the rumination, but it was good. So, the lore cube. The lore cube won. No, who out there has ever heard of Uber? The Deutsche box. So everything that comes out on it is controversial? We're going to veer off topic a little bit with this point. I just wanted to talk about it. That's true, Lurker. There has been some other kind of tactics. For those, I'll just say this. For those of you who haven't heard, Uber is the name of a company and a service where you can basically hire and have someone drive you around to someplace. It's kind of become a lot more common in major metropolitan areas here in the United States. I don't know if this is true in other countries at all, so I don't know if Uber's even in other countries. But it has been gaining a lot of sway lately here, mainly in the metropolitan areas because they are... well, I shouldn't even have to say why, actually. Now, very recently I came across a service called Uber Eats. For a little bit of additional charge for the delivery service and for the tip and whatnot, you can basically, instead of Uber ferrying a person, they send someone over to a restaurant where they actually pick up food, and then they take it to your house and they deliver food to you. It's a way of basically adding delivery, outsourcing delivery, if you will, except it's not outsourcing in the strictest sense of the word because those restaurants didn't offer delivery at all. This is to get delivery for people that, again, would never have done so. This came across my radar just this last week, actually, and I have actually used Uber Eats a couple of times in order to get some variety of food for the little one, Minizan, while I've been taking care of her. It's a cool idea. It's kind of a weird idea when you think about it, because I'm amazed it's taken this long for it to happen. How many of you out there like insert fast food here? I mean, I'll raise my hand on this. Probably not, Dr. Nimbus. When's the Super Bowl? Can you elaborate, by the way, Rascor? I'm curious what you mean. How pricey is it? I mean, I don't know how much it is relative to the actual prices. They build the prices into their menu. Oh, apparently the Super Bowl's today. Ha! So, how many of you have, on occasion, thought, man, I would have really liked to go get insert fast food here, but I either can't, or, I don't feel like getting out, or I'm busy. I am literally astonished that fast food places have not started implementing a delivery service. I really am. Like, that's the kind of thing that's so weird to me that I'm not sure what to make of it. It would add a large number of jobs to a market that is kind of having issues with that and has been for years. It would also add to the... Oh, it's about the taxis. Okay, I'm with that. It would add to... So, one of the reasons that people have sometimes said... You know, that's actually true, Mike's, in some places. Some people have said, well, they can't do that with fast food places. They would make too little money off of it. Have you ever noticed that, like, for example, Pizza Hut or Domino's or whatever have a minimum delivery order? That isn't just arbitrary. That exists because, budget-wise, in order to justify the expense of actually having the salary of the person and the person actually doing the driving, the time involved, and the gas involved, there needs to be a decent amount of money going through. So in other words, order size needs to be a certain amount in order to justify the delivery. Fairly logical, right? Why not do that with fast food? You need to have X number of delivery order in order to justify the delivery cost. And it's also worth noting that places like Pizza Hut and Domino's and whatnot actually charge you more for delivery. I don't know how many... I pointed this out recently and someone was like, I never even noticed that. But yeah, if you're not actually sure, there's actually additional money. You pay more for pizza if you deliver it than if you go pick it up. If you do carry out. Because there's an additional charge for delivery. And we kind of accept this because delivery is convenient. Right? This is especially true when it comes to certain businesses. I mean, there's a reason Jimmy John's, at least in some cities, has made a name for itself based on absolutely nothing else than the fact that it happens to be a delivery service. I'm sorry, Jimmy John's is actually not that good. I mean, it's not bad, but it's not that great. And yet, it delivers. How many offices out there, how many workplaces have literally contracts with Jimmy John's? I know of at least 3 off the top of my head that have long-term contracts with Jimmy John's to have regular deliveries, to bring a whole bunch of sandwiches that get ordered every day for lunch, so that people can keep working through their lunch break, because that's kind of normal right now, at least in the IT industry. I don't know about other industries. Think about it. Now, I'm going to go and address what... I'm going to address what Rascor is pointing out, because Rascor actually has a very valid point. There have been many, many Uber nightmare stories. You know, the idea of, oh my god, these people, again, do not actually know. They don't have to follow the rules. They don't have to abide by certain restrictions. They're just a guy with a driver's license. And to my knowledge, I think that's actually the only requirement is person and driver's license, and that's it. I could be wrong about that. Please feel free to correct me. So that does add the risk aspect to the Uber situation. It's also why Uber is so relatively cheap right now. I say right now because it would be astonishing to me if Uber stays that cheap. What is more likely to happen is the same general restrictions that hit taxis back in the 60s or 70s? I don't actually remember when. When they really started regulating taxi services will eventually hit Ubers as well, and then they will raise the price in order to accommodate that. But that's not... I'm not actually really talking about Uber here. As weird as that sound, I just used Uber as an example because Uber Eats is a thing in San Francisco and in the Atlanta area. I don't know elsewhere, but those are the 2 I know of for certainty. So, yeah. Why don't other places do deliveries? Why can't I call up my local Burger King and say, yeah, I'd like 3 triple Whoppers with no mayonnaise, but extra onions and extra pickles? Here's my address. I guarantee you 3 triple Whoppers would be a large enough delivery. That would actually probably cost more than a pizza. Off the top of my head, that would be about $19, not counting delivery charge. Why is that not a thing? Why can't I do that? This is a real question. Can anyone give me a reason? I mean, there's a one positive idea, maybe it's too expensive, but as I've already explained, it's really not. You know, I don't know, Little Billy. It's been a long time since I've even used it. Let me try it. I still have it somewhere. Let's see if it still works. Hang on. I mean, honestly, what do you guys think? I'm opening the door up here. Is it here? No. That's entirely possible, Zwan. That they judge it to be not worth the expense involved. The whole, we're not making all the money situation. That is entirely feasible. Ah, I can't click the thing. Whoops! I didn't mean to do that. I meant to do this. It's still not working. Oh, right, I need to do this. There we go. It is apparently working. Woo. Let's shrink the font size a little bit. And do this. That's a bit too much. We'll go to 5. So anyways, we'll just move that like right about there. So anyways, it's another one of those weird situations. Actually, I do have a theoretical of why fast food places, why other restaurants, why non-pizza places don't do deliveries. And my theory is the fact, in addition to cultural momentum, I mean, if you think delivery food right now, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? I bet it's one of two things, Chinese or pizza. I bet money that it's one of those two things. I wouldn't be surprised at all if, in addition to the cultural momentum problem, we also have a situation where there's a term for it, and I can't actually think of it off the top of my head. It's basically upfront cost, long-term benefit. There's actually a term for that economically, and I can't think of it right now. But it's when you invest a lot of money now to be able to spend less money later. Setting up a new delivery service would actually maybe, it would be expensive to set up, and would at least theoretically be easy to maintain, the same way that pizza places kind of maintain it right now, for example. And apparently there have been test markets for doing delivery, which apparently has not been worth it, which is part of the reason why it would cost money up front, because you would have to be basically operating at a loss in order for people to get used to the idea. I bet you money, barrier to entry, thank you, that's a great way to put that. I bet you money, right now, that a lot of those test markets they did, the people who were there didn't know it was an option. What do you want to bet? And you would have to, by definition, keep doing it for a long time, again, basically operating at a loss, in order to get it to the point where it is normalized enough so that people realize that they have a delivery option that is not pizza, and then be like, oh, I can deliver blah 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 as well, and then it becoming more normal, and then it becoming more common as a result. Because I can tell you from personal experience right now, I know many people who, when they think delivery, they immediately think, man, I want to I don't want to go anywhere, but I don't want pizza right now. I've thought that myself. I don't actually like pizza that much, but I put up with it because I need to eat, or else I get these massive headaches, and I don't want to stop streaming because this is my job. It's the same as if when I used to work through my lunch break. Every freaking day I worked at that place. Anyways, that's actually all I got for today. Actually, I wanted to mention one thing really quick. I'm not sure why. There was actually a news post about this, and it was deleted. So, fortunately, I actually saved it locally on a notepad, which I'm pulling up right now. So they've talked about the stuff they're patching into FF15. I'm just going to hit these really quick. So they're going to be trying to support HD in the PS4 Pro, and they're going to try and support 60 FPS. They do make the clear point that 60 FPS is going to be the top end, so that it's not always going to be 60 FPS. Shrug. Yeah, I agree with that. Philodigm? Philodigm? Help me out. I agree, though. I agree that's what they should have probably done, though. No, I will not, Hourglass. I generally don't give out my email for reasons that should be extremely obvious. They're also going to be adding timed quests, like event quests, calendar quests. They're going to be raising the experience cap to 120. They're increasing the number of photos you can keep to 200. They're adding the ability to be able to play your MP3 player while on a chocobo. Awesome. Speaking of which, they're also working on the ability to drive the Regalia off-road, which I find hilarious because if you remember, it was probably the first thing I did when I got behind the wheel of the Regalia was immediately start driving towards my destination, which happened to be off the road. They're going to be doing, of course, some stuff in late March, planned. This is all planned, not definitive, to enhance the final stages of the game, including Chapter 13, adding the ability to play as Gladiolus for a short period of time during that section. Philodyme. I can do Philodyme. Actually, I do agree with you, Raskor. It's just, we'll see what happens in the future of that. It's the same thing as just about anything. Why... Yeah, whatever. Although I find it funny that you couldn't give a tiniest bit of a damn about the Star Trek thing, but you care about this thing, even though they have the same root cause. Anyways, so there's also going to be adding a booster pack, which you can buy, which is DLC, which basically gives you Mega Gear. And there's also a piece of gear that you're going to be able to buy as a DLC, which literally is a cheat suit. It's a Magitech exosuit, which makes you frickin' invincible. So, I mean, it's cool that they're adding cheats to their game. Why do I have to buy it? There's, of course, Episode Gladiolus, which is mentioned there. Episode Prompto, which is supposed to be coming out in June. Which both of those will be entirely focused on character development. They have a survey out right now for what people want to see in future updates of FF15. I do not have a link to it because, as I said, the link was taken down. I'm not sure if I just had the wrong link or they weren't supposed to release it yet or whatever. But if you can find the link, Square Enix apparently has a survey right now about that. And I guess that's actually it. Hajime Tabata, hope I'm pronouncing that name right, has mentioned that he has several other things he wants to do in the future with the game as well. We live in such a weird era. They are patching a console game. Did they really, Valvedrix? Wow. Yes, I am aware of that, actually, Maz. But yeah, so they're just continuing to patch the game. It's such a weird thing. Because... on the one hand, I firmly believe, I really do, that if corporate decisions were not involved, if it was just up to the developers of the game, all of the stuff that they wanted would have come out when the game came out. But they couldn't because they had a deadline, because they needed to make some frickin' money off the series, and because they needed to buy back some goodwill as quickly as possible. Whether it succeeded or not, who knows? It is, I talked about this before actually, it is admirable in its own right, even though this is actually the beginning of a slippery slope right here. This could very, very easily go very wrong if other companies look and say, oh, we'll just release this stuff, and then we'll patch it over the next year. That actually brings me up to an interesting final point, for realsies this time. Let's say for a moment that you really like Mass Effect. I think that's at least statistically possible for my viewers. So, you like Mass Effect. Now, let's say for the next, I don't know, 2 years after Mass Effect came out, they kept releasing the occasional expansion. Additional content, additional quests, and whatnot. Cool, right? Here's what I wanted to mention, and this is why I'm just mentioning this in brief. How long do you think it would take you to, shall we say, fully consume the additional content for a Mass Effect expansion? I'm not saying it's bad, by the way. I'm not saying it's horrible. I'm not saying it shouldn't happen. They're releasing another expansion to Age of Empires 2. For God's sakes. Another one. In addition to the one that just came out. Like, last year, I want to say. So, I mean, this is a thing now. But... why, exactly, are we at the point in time at which... Well, okay. So you play this expansion. It's great! Yay! Woo! And then you move on. I mention this because it is my opinion that too many people, in general, do not understand that games are different from each other. That if you release an expansion for Mass Effect, for example, that regardless of quality or price, it will only ever add so many hours of gameplay and replayability to that game. Whereas if you released an expansion to, and this is what actually brought this up from my mind, Stellaris, a 4X game or a grand strategy game, if they released a brand new expansion to Stellaris, which is good, which this new one appears to be, how many additional hours of gameplay do you think you're going to get out of that? Versus the Mass Effect example I gave earlier. I only mention this because I have this weird feeling that people are not viewing it in these perspectives. That this is I have no real evidence of this. This is just wild speculation, but I actually genuinely perceive that there are people, corporate people, developers, and marketers, who just look at an expansion as an expansion and a DLC as a DLC, and then and don't understand that there is a complete variance in difference between how much new content is added into a new game depending on the genre of the game. You know? Hours of gameplay, Saldir. So. You say that, Raskar. I don't agree. I mean, I'm sure there are people who would play it anyways. It's entirely likely and possible. However, is it that out of bounds to consider the thought of, man, I had kind of lost interest in Alpha Centauri or Master of Orion or whatever, but now this new expansion's coming out and it's adding all this new wonderful stuff to this particular game, so now I can go and play this new expansion and play it again, reinstall it, you know. I don't know. I think my real point I'm trying to make here is that people do not understand the difference in things. Too many people like to summarize. I know I myself have actually started summarizing recently. I justify that in that every summary I do has a link in the description of the video and a button you can click in the video itself that leads to a much more in-depth discussion. Because I honestly believe that a lot of what's wrong with humanity right now, and I hate to say something like that, is that we summarize too much. Life is complicated. Things are complicated. People are complicated. And we're all like, oh, well, just give me a sentence. Summarize it. I can't tell you how many times I've had a comment on one of my videos where you could have just said the game was good, unlike an hour rumination. What information would be conveyed if I just said, this game's good? Nothing. All I would be saying is, it is my opinion that this was good. Anyways, I'm sorry. Getting off on a rant. Let's see what the poll's at. I'm going to go ahead and chop this off for our local recorders, local viewers. Goodbye forever. No, I'm kidding. I'll see you later. But anyway.